Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the podcast. Today I'm super excited to be here today with Akshat. He's about to enter his second year of medical school at McGovern. And yeah, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, Jericho.
So I want to dive straight into the MCAT because you are a 99th percentile test taker. So first of all, how long did you study? When did you take the test? What was your study schedule like during that period?
Sure. Yeah, sure. So I think personally, I think a lot of the studying for the MCAT is really done honestly outside your dedicated study period through the classes that you take. So I would definitely recommend if anybody is a second, like if you're a third year or fourth year, obviously it's kind of past that time for you. But if you're a first year listening to this, definitely plan out the classes that you're taking so that you take them, with the MCAT in mind. So for example, take biochem, take orgo, take all those things. Other than that, I studied for 2 months. So I think you don't necessarily need to study for a really long period of time. Even 2 months might have been, overdoing it because I had taken those relevant classes already. So I kind of already knew the information. I gave myself 1 month to learn information from like Kaplan books and stuff. And then the second month, all I did was practice questions. And I think that second month was really the only month that was truly necessary to do well on the MCAT, because the more questions you do, the higher your score is going to be. That's the easiest way to put it. And a lot of people said use only the AAMC material. I think it's the double AAMC that makes it, right? Yeah, some people said use only that material. Some people said use everything. I used everything, right? I didn't buy anything. So there's a lot of free practice tests online. So definitely, just do those free ones. I bought the exam materials that were given by the AAMC, and I did those, and I saved those kind of for last because those are the best predictors of what your actual score will be. But other than that, I did all the other questions as well that I could get my hands on. And I think that's the best strategy, is do as many questions as possible.
Okay. Did you use any resources for content review, or was it really just things,
Yeah.
because you said, yeah.
Yeah. So I used the Kaplan books. One of my friends had bought I think they have like a bundle of like books or something for the MCAT, right? And one of my friends had it, so I took it from her, and I just used those. You can get it from the library as well. Don't go. I would never recommend anybody to go and invest like lots of money to buy those things, because they're freely publicly available in libraries usually. So just go and like check one out from your public library and flip through it. A lot of the information you should already know from your prereqs if you've taken them all. If you haven't taken them all, then it becomes a lot more important to start using those books.
Okay. And yeah, I totally agree with doing the practice questions. That was, at least in my experience, I'm studying for the MCAT right now, so hopefully everything goes well. But do you have any tips? Yeah, thank you. Do you have any tips for doing it? Like, should you focus more on content review, or should you focus more on test taking strategy? Is the MCAT more of a content-based exam, or is it more of applying the knowledge,
It's definitely not a content-based exam. It's definitely applying the knowledge. So a lot of the, for example, I took physiology, right, at UH, and I thought that was helpful for the MCAT, but it wasn't necessary. And a lot of the material in, for example, the Kaplan biology book for the MCAT is physiology, and you honestly don't need to know it, because a lot of that information will be given in the passages that you're tested on, right? What the MCAT really tests is, can you analyze a graph, or can you find the conclusions of a study? And so that's why test questions are so important to do, because when you're doing the test questions and you get it wrong, you need to read the explanation and really figure out, why am I getting this wrong? So one of the things that I used to do is, I have a test, I always took tests like they were the real thing, right? So if I had, found only 50 questions from one resource, I would combine it with questions from other resources to create kind of like mock tests. And I always sat and did those tests. I spent an entire day doing those exams, and then the next day I would review those exams, right? Or those mock exams that I created. And when you review an exam, you need to look at say the passage gave you some type of graph, and it asks you about the graph, right? What I used to do is just look. A lot of the times you can just get your answers from looking at the graphs and trying to describe the graphs to yourself. You should be able to write one statement about the graph describing it, right? And a lot of the times those statements help you answer the questions that they ask. So yeah, I think it's a lot more based on your strategy and your mindset going into the exam. It's definitely not that much content based. I think my friends and I used to joke that really all you need for the biochem section is to know the amino acids, and beyond that, it's all just like, yeah. Beyond that, it's so much of it is just like your thinking and everything. You know, content based is going to be once you're in medical school and preparing for USMLE step one. That exam is a lot more content based, but for MCAT, it's definitely a lot more like study strategy based. I'm trying to think of other things that were helpful for me. Definitely do everything whenever you take your exams, try and make it exactly like the real test day. So I would get up at the same time, I would eat the same things that I would eat on test day. So you're kind of training your body at the same time, like to be prepared, because sitting for 6 hours and taking an exam is really difficult. So much of the MCAT, so many people think it's so much content based, but so much of it is just like mindset based, and just like, is your body ready? Are you mentally ready to take a 6-hour exam? Because you'll do really well in the first few sections, but by the last section, you'll be so fatigued, and you need to be able to maintain that.
What was your MCAT schedule like, I guess, in the last few weeks? Was it kind of just the same thing? You would do more practice tests and practice questions, or did you kind of like tone it down?
Yeah, it was practice tests, and and then so I would take a practice test on one day, then I would spend the entire next day reviewing it. My recommendation for reviewing exam questions is, don't be afraid to treat it kind of like a rabbit hole type situation, where if you find one thing you don't understand in the question, start researching that one thing and learning about it. And then if that leads you to a second thing that you don't understand, look into that. It's okay if you spend like an hour reviewing just one question, because that's one question now you'll know really well, and you'll like know everything from it. So I definitely recommend doing that. And yeah, that was basically my schedule. Was I would take an exam, then I would relax the rest of the day after I've taken the exam, and then the next day I would spend a lot of time reviewing that exam. And I think I took the day before my test off, and I think I took either the day before my test or 2 days before my test off.
Okay, that's good to know. So yeah, why don't we move on into medical school? What are some of the best things about medical school? Maybe specifically about McGovern itself. Mm-hmm. What are things that maybe have surprised you?
Yeah, so I think the really big selling point about McGovern is its administration and its faculty, and how supportive they are of students and student initiatives. I'm actually on the curriculum committee for the school. So I think McGovern is the only school that I personally know that has students on its curriculum committee. And it's not like we're just there to, just for them to be able to say, oh, we have students on our curriculum committee. They actually involve us in so many things. And, we've presented, curriculum changes to them, and they've actually implemented those changes. They're always open and listening to us. And I think I really started to understand all this when the coronavirus pandemic hit. McGovern was one of the first schools to say, okay, students don't come in. We're going to have everybody study from home and everything. And they were so accommodating to everyone's needs. We actually have a grading system at McGovern for preclinical years, but they suspended that and said, let's go to a pass-fail system, because we understand our students are pressured in such a situation. So I think McGovern's biggest selling point is its administration and how they take care of the students. I think that's the best thing about the school.
What are some other things about general medical school that made, things that you learned, during MS1?
Yeah. So I think the amount of information, everybody always says it's a lot of information. I think that was the biggest surprise to me, is just how much information you're able to learn in such a short period of time. Because I've always been the type of student that loves to push him or herself. Like, I think my last semester at UH, I took something like 25 credit hours in one semester, and I still thought like medical school was a lot of work. So, but you get used to it. You become really good at time management, and you get used to it. And once you're used to it, you realize like how much you can push yourself, and how you can be the best version of yourself. I think that's something I've come to realize about medical school.
I guess how long do you study a day? It seems very busy in medical school. How long do you study a day?
Yeah, so I study. It's hard to say, because and I feel like the answer I give would be longer than most students, just because I'm the type of person that like I actually enjoy studying. So yeah, so I like overdo it sometimes. Like I'll do some, yeah. So I mean, yeah, well, it is bad sometimes because you start burning yourself out, right? But yeah, but I would, it's hard to say an exact number, but anywhere from, 7 to 8 hours, 6 to 8 hours, let's say that. Yeah.
Okay, 6 to 8 hours.
Yeah.
And what is like a typical day like? Is it, going over lectures? Is it doing Anki? I see a lot of medical students using Anki.
I actually have very mixed feelings about Anki, and we can go into that if you want. But my typical day will be like, I'll get up. I'll if there's any. Sometimes we have PBL, which is problem-based lectures and things required for McGovern. So I'll attend those if those are required. Otherwise, I'll get up. I'll exercise. I'll start doing my Anki first, and I'll get my Anki out of the way if I can for the day, and then I'll then I'll look at my schedule, and I usually do 4 or 5 videos a day. So from third-party resources. So that's another good thing about McGovern is we're not required to necessarily use their resources, and we have NBME exams. NBME is the same organization that makes your USMLE Step 1 exams, and so we have questions from NBME. So they're old step questions, and so our curriculum is kind of students can kind of use third-party resources that are made for step 1 to study alongside the curriculum. So a lot of students end up using those third-party resources. And so I'll watch 4 or 5 videos of those a day, do the new Anki cards I need to do for them, and then I'll call it a day. So that's kind of what the typical day is like.
You have experience with networking as well. What is the importance of networking, maybe as a pre-med student or a med student? And do you have any tips on networking?
Yeah. So I think networking is extremely, extremely important because you never know, when a certain connection could be of use. Not to say that that's the only reason you should network, but finding mentors is really important because they're in positions that you want to be able to get to one day. So they've done everything that you're doing, right? So they kind of have knowledge and expertise that you can use. And then another reason why it's important is you can learn from their mistakes, right? You don't necessarily have to make your own mistakes. You can learn from other people's mistakes and be better. And you can learn from their successes as well. And my tips would be utilize cold emailing. I feel like that's an underutilized resource by students. A lot of these, if you reach out to a professor or a doctor, a lot of these people don't have like that many students reaching out to them, and everybody likes to talk about what they're doing and their work, and everybody likes to talk about themselves, basically, right? Very few people don't like to talk about themselves, and especially doctors are kind of doctors are that breed of people that aren't the shyest people, right? They like to talk about their accomplishments, and so if you cold email them, that can be a really powerful technique. Just say, hey, I'm a student, I'm interested in XYZ, and especially once you have a medical student email, that email is so powerful because they'll know you're legit, right? You're not just like anybody right off the street. You're a medical student, and so that holds some weight because somebody's invested a lot of time and resources into you, namely your medical school, and so that shows them that you're a good student to spend their time on as well.
Okay. Who do you recommend networking with? Is it a lot of physicians, maybe professors? And what are some instances in which you used kind of like networking?
Yeah, so I think it depends on your goals, right? So if you're somebody who's really interested in research, then yeah, network with people who are doing research that seems interesting to you, right? If you're really interested, for example, I'm really interested in entrepreneurship in medicine and how you can create like new medical technologies to help improve patient care. So I've been reaching out to people that are involved in that. So for example, I've reached out to a couple of professors at McGovern who've created some inventions that they've spun off into their own startup companies. And so to learn from them and see what that's about. And yeah, you'll be surprised how receptive people are. So just identify what it is that you want in a mentor, what it is, I think the first thing is just to know your own goals and ambitions and kind of write those down. And then once you have those things down, then you can start identifying people who would be useful for that. And then you can start, cold emailing them and networking with them. So it's really important to know what you want before you reach out to people.
Okay. I guess to end things off a little bit, what are some of the biggest myths you think are out there about medical school? Yeah, what are some of the biggest myths? Yeah.
Yeah, I would say I would say a big myth that I hear a lot of pre-med students at least thinking is MCAT is everything, right? MCAT isn't actually everything as far as medical admissions, and that's what they tell us in medical school as well. You know, on your first day there, they'll be like, you know, a lot of thought went into accepting every single one of you. And you know, it's not just your MCAT score. In fact, they actually told our class, how many of you think that MCAT was the major reason you're here? And like everybody raised their hand, and then they were like, you know, that's not it. It's because of your life experiences and, you know, everything that you talk about in your essays. Those things sometimes might even play a more important role. Because if you look at average, if you look at average MCAT scores of incoming medical students, they're not all in the 100th percentile, 99th percentile, 98th percentile. It's more in line of a 510 or 511. McGovern's average is the 511. So, you know, if you're there or slightly above or below, don't worry. You can still get into medical school. That's what I would have to say is one of the biggest myths that I've seen.